Tonight's program will start with a short poem titled Murmurings by Pam Newton. Murmurings by Pam Newton in honor of the Peace Memorial 2021. The survival of the innermost soul of our species resides in the capacity to love, to witness, and to share our pain, to know what we are capable of, the horror recognized, and then to reimagine a world of conscience, connection, affection, restitution, and peace. Here, a poetry of body image, song and stamping feet, dreaming up iron rain, to warm and feed us, all in our desperate lives. Once again, that honors the honey of hives. We gather here in the sanctuary as a new beginning, with heat in our hearts, sharing unbearable tears, healing flowing between us. May the violence incinerate itself, burn bright, allowing shadow to sputter out and misunderstanding to cease.
Okori Jizo. A long time ago, when Japan was at war with many countries of the world, there was a small Jizo statue in back of street in Hiroshima. The Jizo stood there smiling, so he was called Smiling Jizo. That day, as usual, the Jizo was standing and smiling. The bright midsummer sunshine was pouring on the buildings, houses, and schools, and the Jizo was standing, shining brightly. Suddenly, in the deep blue sky, the enemy's warplane appeared, sharply lowered its altitude, and dropped a bomb in the center of Hiroshima. In the blink of an eye, the area was filled with glaring white light, and when everyone held his breath, Hiroshima had a monster explosion. It was as if the sun had fallen. Building, houses, and utility poles became lumps of fire and were slammed onto the ground and blown into the sky. People's eyes were crushed, their ears were torn, and their burnt bodies were covered all over with melting skin. They were on their hands and knees, screaming, "It hurts! Help me! Help!" In the back street, the Jizo was blown away by the crosswinds from the blast. Boom! He fell and was buried underneath the burning sand. Only his smiling face could be seen, peeking through the ground. In front of the Jizo's face, the people, their hair burnt and crumpled, their skin peeling and hanging down, ran away one after the other. The next day, the entire city of Hiroshima was a burnt field. People tried, but failed to get up, were found everywhere, rolling around like logs. Then, from a distance, what at first seemed like an old, tattered piece of cloth blown by the wind, came into view. It was a little girl in torn clothing, whose body seemed to be melting. She swayed sideways as she approached, and when she finally got to the Jizo statue, She collapsed face down, as if she could not walk a step further. Her bare back was all burnt, as if a peony had been pasted on it. For a while, the little girl's body was still, except for her shoulders moving up and down with her panting. Eventually, her eyes, which seemed lifeless, found the face of the Jizo, and she said, "Mom?" The Jizo's smiling face must have reminded her of her own mother. "Mom, I want to drink water, water." The little girl's mouth was dry, and needless to say, there wasn't a single drop of water on the burnt field in the scorching summer sun. The little girl kept repeating, "Water, water," and her voice weakened. Then the Jizo, whose face had been smiling all the time, started little by little to change his expression. His lips tightly closed and his eyes opened. More and more, the power grew inside him until it threatened to break forth. The Jizo's face was like the face of the neo-god, glaring intensely at someone. "Water, water." The little girl's voice could barely be heard. Then, tears started to overflow from the Jizo's open eyes. And then, drip, drip, drip. The tears were falling down his cheeks and into the girl's mouth. "Go, go, go." The girl kept drinking. After drinking the Jizo's tears, the little girl looked at him and smiled faintly. Then she lifted her neck and looked at the distant sky. Her mouth moved slightly, as if she was singing, but eventually she laid her head and never moved again. And then, as if the world had suddenly become unbearable, the Jizo's tightly clenched face rattled, shattered into small pieces, and scattered all over the ground. Let us now have a moment of silence.
Thank you. This is the message from the mayor of Hiroshima. It is an honor and pleasure to send this message on the occasion of the Hiroshima-Nagasaki Peace Memorial 2021. On August 6, 1945, a single atom bomb destroyed our city, claiming countless innocent lives. Having experienced the tragedy of the bombing, Hiroshima continuously appeals for a peaceful world without nuclear weapons, based on the ardent will of the Hibakusha. No one else should suffer as we have. However, looking at the global situation surrounding nuclear weapons, more than 13,000 nuclear warheads still exist today, with nuclear weapon states increasing and modernizing their nuclear arsenals instead of fulfilling their obligations to pursue negotiations in good faith for nuclear disarmament, as stipulated in Article 6 of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT. As humanity continues to face its newest threat, COVID-19, the world has come together to tackle the virus, proof that we are capable of responding to this threat. I believe that the people of the world will be able to overcome the threat posed to humankind by nuclear weapons in much the same way, by working together under common principles and remaining steadfast in our opposition. As the number of people who can speak of the horrors of those weapons from experience declines, it is increasingly important to pass their earnest will for peace on to the next generation, established as a shared value of civil society, the idea that nuclear weapons and war should not exist, and make every effort toward realizing world peace. The NPT, which went into effect in 1970, and the Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which entered into force in January 2021, are both critical to the elimination of nuclear weapons. Even though they comprise a framework that we must pass on to future generations, their future is yet opaque. In order for world leaders to strengthen their determination to ensure this framework functions effectively, it is vital that we create an environment that steers them towards transforming policy. We must continue to raise awareness of peace in civil society so that we may generate momentum toward peace and nurture international public opinion for nuclear abolition. It therefore could not be more meaningful that you have organized the Hiroshima-Nagasaki Peace Memorial 2021 to call for a peaceful world free of nuclear weapons, and I extend to you my deepest respect. Together with more than 8,000 mayors for peace, member cities from 165 countries and regions, the city of Hiroshima intends to create an environment that encourages world leaders to take steps toward nuclear abolition. I would like to ask all of you to act in solidarity with us as we strive to eliminate the absolute evil that is nuclear weapons and realize lasting world peace. In closing, I extend my best wishes for the great success of this event, as well as the good health and happiness of all in attendance. August 6, 2021, Matsui Kazumi, Mayor of the City of Hiroshima.
Message of peace for the city of Nagasaki. For this occasion of the Hiroshima-Nagasaki Peace Memorial Ceremony in Boston, I am sending this message on behalf of the citizens of Nagasaki, Japan. I'd like to express our respect and appreciation for the sincere efforts of the organizers who have been working toward achieving world peace despite the current pandemic situation. At 11:02 a.m., August 9th, 1945, an atomic bomb exploded over the city of Nagasaki and ruined our city instantly. As violent blasts, heat waves, and radioactive rays relentlessly assaulted citizens, the atomic bomb explosion took the lives of 74,000 citizens, while injuring 75,000 more. Those who had barely survived still suffer from traumas caused by radiation to this day. With a strong desire that no one in the world should experience the same devastating event, atomic bomb victims, knowing the threat of nuclear weapons on their own, have continued to share their painful and hard to remember experiences toward expressing the abolition of nuclear weapons. The appeals of victims came to fruition in January of this year with the enforcement of a treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. 76 years since the atomic bomb explosions in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, this treaty marks the start of realizing a world without nuclear weapons. Although the treaty has been effective, over 13,000 nuclear warheads still remain in the world. And the global situation around these nuclear weapons is very critical. In such chaotic times, each of us needs to think of this issue as a personal matter, not something happening in the faraway world, and to take actions toward accelerating the abolition of nuclear weapons with enhancement from the treaty. There are many things we can do for peace. Expressing the hope for peace through arts, in events like the Hiroshima-Nagasaki Peace Memorial ceremony in Boston, is one of them. Experiencing those arts and thinking about world peace is another example of something we can do. We, the citizens of society, are the foundation generating world peace. I pray that today's ceremony will cultivate the seeds of peace in your hearts. Grow them big and spread a peaceful culture all over the world. In closing, I extend my best wishes for the great success of the Hiroshima-Nagasaki Peace Memorial ceremony in Boston, as well as the good health and happiness of all in attendance. Tomihisa, Taue, Mayor of Nagasaki, Japan.
Konbanwa, and thank you. I want to thank all who've been involved in organizing this evening's program. Friends, the A bombings 76 years ago were crimes against humanity. They were indiscriminate, unnecessary, and ushered in an era in which human survival remains constantly threatened. Hibakusha, the courageous and inspired A bomb survivors, warn us that human beings and nuclear weapons cannot coexist. I've long had the privilege of working with and learning from Hibakusha and others in the Japanese nuclear abolition movement. Hibakusha now average about 83 years old, and we lose more of them every year. This is one reason why this evening's ceremony and others like it are so important. The Hibakusha have helped us to understand and have led opposition to nuclear weapons. They've influenced international opinion and actions, including the recent negotiation of the Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. We must keep the memory of the Hibakushas and their dedication to creating a nuclear weapons-free world alive. And we must also take actions to move our societies. Let me briefly describe what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki and why. Those A-bombs were small by today's standards. Their fireballs had the heat of the sun, about 3 million degrees. In the first second, the bomb's radioactive waves poisoned everyone within a 2-mile radius. Then came the blast wave, destroying nearly all of Hiroshima's buildings within a 2-mile radius. The blast wave was followed by a heat wave, burning devastated ruins and people across the cities. A friend of mine, Professor Shoji Shawada, had a not uncommon experience. He was 6 years old and at home with his mother. The blast wave destroyed their home, leaving his mother pinned beneath a beam. The heat wave engulfed their home in fire. Shoji struggled to move the beam to save his mother's life, but he was small, and there was no one to help. As he worked frantically to save her, crying in fear and out of desperation, this fire spread. His mother screamed at him that he must run away, abandon her, and save his own life. This is Sawada Sensei's searing memory, and that of many other Hibakusha. It led him to dedicate his life to completely banning nuclear weapons. Those who initially survived A bombings witnessed and suffered hell on earth. Bodies so badly burned you couldn't tell if they had been women or men. Scorched and blackened people, walking like ghosts, skin hanging from their hands and bodies, eyeballs protruding from their faces, body organs exposed. Dying and moaning, "Give me water." Others drowned in rivers and in cisterns. Most hospitals were destroyed. Half or more of the doctors and nurses were killed or incapacitated. And what medicines there were useless against radioactive poisons. By year's end, 210,000 people had died from the 2 bombs. To pacify international opinion, Hiroshima and Nagasaki were cordoned off. Journalists' film and notes were seized. Some of the film footage, like this photograph of Taniguchi Sumitaro, who went on to become a leading force in the Hibakusha movement, despite his open wounds. This film was secreted away in the Pentagon to prevent those images from being used as propaganda against the U.S. in the Cold War. Few know that senior military leaders opposed the A-bombings. They understood that Japan was defeated and seeking to surrender on terms that President Truman accepted after the A-bombings, that Hirohito remained on his throne. As General and later President Eisenhower put it, it wasn't necessary to hit Japan for that terrible thing. The determinative reason for the A-bombings was to win Japan's immediate surrender before the Soviet Union could join the war. The U.S. sought to avoid sharing influence in Manchuria, North China, and Korea. And Truman wanted a hammer over those boys, Stalin and his coterie in the Kremlin. To be clear, the Asia-Pacific War was between competing empires, Japan's, the United States, and Britain's. Japan, where militarists came to power through a series of assassinations, began what became the 15-year war. The Japanese nuclear disarmament movement began in 1954. The massive Bikini H-bomb test, whose radioactive fallout poisoned Marshall Islanders, Japanese fishermen, and Japan's food supply, ignited the movement. 25 million signatures for nuclear weapons abolition were gathered, and the first World Conference against ANH bombs was held. There, several Hibakusha came out from their tortured shadows and spoke for the first time. This encouraged other Hibakusha to join in founding Hidankyo, the Japan Confederation of ANH bomb sufferers organizations, with a commitment to prevent nuclear war, eliminate nuclear weapons, and win medical and other assistance for Hibakusha. Watanabe Chieko is like a Japanese saint. As an adolescent, she was sent to work in a Nagasaki machine factory. The A-bomb blast crumpled the building and pinned her body beneath twisted steel beams and broke her back. She never walked again, and she suffered radiation diseases. Despite her disabilities, her vision, spirit, and determination were such that she led organizing for Hidankyo. She is held in such high regard that her wheelchair and photo are brought on stage annually at the World Conference, and there's music that has been composed and performed in her honor. Senji Yamaguchi was also a co-founder of the Hibakusha movement. His suffering, courage, and commitment were such that while broadcasting Prime Minister Koizumi's speech at the 2002 August 9th official ceremony, the NHK anchor interrupted to say, quote, "The Prime Minister is still speaking. We will now turn to interview Senji Yamaguchi, a leading Hibakusha." Can you imagine CBS, NBC interrupting Biden to interview a courageous person? Hard to imagine. For many people, Senji is this horrifying photo of his boiled body that confronts them in peace museums, on the web, and in numerous books and pamphlets. The photo is evidence of what 3,000 degrees of nuclear heat does to a person. Children called Yamaguchi-san Red Demon and ran away when they saw him. What we can't see is his searing memory of the charred remains of a pregnant woman who had been standing near him and was blown apart. Senji endured 20 surgeries, and like many other Hibakusha, in despair, he twice tried to commit suicide. Yet with remarkable courage, Senji became an indefatigable organizer and speaker, a lion of the Hibakusha movement, helping people across Japan and internationally to understand the urgent necessity of abolishing nuclear weapons. To intimate his and other Hibakusha's courage, listen to Senji's words. On the surface, the damage of the bombing becomes less and less visible. However, for Hibakusha, mental and physical wounds remain. They will never disappear. Many Hibakusha have been on the edge of life, like walking on a thin rope. For them, living is as painful as dying. But for Hibakusha, the campaign against ANH bombs has been one of the reasons for not throwing away their lives. One of my fondest memories of Senji is when he escaped from a hospital, made his way to the World Conference, roared his condemnation of nuclear weapons, and shook the hall with his call to eliminate the weapons of the devil. That was after he had traveled to New York, where he spoke in the UN General Assembly. Senji, Watanabe-san, Sawada-san, Taniguchi-san, and other Hibakusha have won important victories. Medical care and financial assistance for many Hibakusha, including just last week. They are largely responsible for preventing Japan from becoming a nuclear weapons power. And there is the Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. As Ban Ki-moon, the former Secretary General of the UN, said, governments alone will not deliver us a nuclear weapons-free world. It requires action from people like us. So let me close with a simple appeal. Continue learning about the Hibakusha, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and the continuing existential nuclear threats. Encourage the Japanese government to sign and ratify the Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And join the Peace Movement and Disarmament Movement webinars and meeting here, and for those of you from Japan, back home. Domo arigato.
So, as before, this is Peace Pieces by Pam Newton. Creating peace is much like the weaving of a multicolored stole. Rather than meditating, more like spinning and singing than self-intoxicating, a deep dive into the birthplace and circumstances of the other, of the community, the era, and the landscape entire, dirt and growth, stones, springs, uncertain weather, its mire and specific secret hieroglyphs. Creating peace may start inside, but there is always the other part of the hand, turning back and forth, the conflict longing for a needed resolution. On the inside, outside of every institution, be that restitution, intrusion, grieving, recitation in prayer, swirling, skipping stones on the surface and studying the ripples that travel on and on to other shores, picking up the pieces of a life shattered after a war, a bombing, a tsunami, a drought, a whimper followed by a shout. Life continues to pop up through the mud, calls your feet to dance up rain and tears, build boats and graves filled with bones, sacred midst anguished sobs, grunts and furies and guttural tones, marked or unmarked. Singing, music expresses the trauma and the glory. Ah, peace, weaving the pieces back together, sometimes in new patterns, with tiny stitches that gather the fragments tenderly as we chant our hymns, where the heart belongs, to protect the innocent, transforming the guilty, the blind and wounded, sensing the essence in the other that can help us heal together, create a better world where kindness reigns. As drought calls out to rain, please restore the meaning, render new life. After this onslaught of death and incessant strife, the hopeless hope, the thrice-mended soul, holding the seeds, spreading the nets, treasuring these pieces of the multi-hued soul as a swarm of love, a crown of bees, making honey without needing to sting. The other, the hungry, the cruel letting go as we share our own stories, chant, write, and sing. Creating peace, always renew, mellifluous song, healing anew, hidden in layers of earth, sand, roots, and trees, resonant sounds of water and burns, call us aloft in cascading turns to relight the flame, lanterns afloat, advancing the warp, rebuilding our trust and securing the weft to fasten new work, gong, drum, flute, lute, and harp, removing the thorns so infinitely sharp, weaving the wisdom of treasure and dross to sustain eternal dimensions as we honor our loss. Thank you. And now I will be reading the second poem, also by Pam Newton, called Hi Number 2, Yes in Japanese. Hi comes from the heart, aligning with the mind. Yes to life for every hour, to honor all mankind. We weep and grieve and then awake, for now is the time filled with choices to make. For we can teach to each dear friend, saying yes to all, those bridges to mend. High for every day, with growing light to serve, this chance for us to build a world of love and verve. High, 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 high. Thank you.
Well, that was somebody flying in at the last moment. Very good, sir. I'd like to invite back up here as one of the storytellers. And of course, we're going to extend an invitation to any one of you who would like to say something tonight from the heart. So please, if you could. Yes, you. Thank you, sir. I discovered that we share a school. That has been a long time, sir. Thank you.
I am the source of our nuclear agony. Call me by my rightful name. I am Raytheon, Boeing, Lockheed Martin. No one can stop me. Thousands try. Oh, how they try. They stand outside my windows day and night, their lips curled in a surreal dance, sending words I cannot hear behind my soundproof, bulletproof windows. They send bushels of petitions to the great white father in the great white house, urging, begging, demanding that I cease and desist. All the while I feast on their names, their faceless names. The streets they live on I devour ravenously like the Goliath I so proudly am. They beg me to save the world's children while turning a blind eye to the daily slaughter of their own, their very own here in America. The daily barbecue of unbridled NRA guns. 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 My brothers and sisters of the Nuclear Club share with me my legacy of nuclear mass destruction. Three Mile Island, Chernobyl, Bikini Atoll, Arctic Ocean. Only I am the proud owner of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. No one can match me to the tune of hundreds of thousands of lives taken by radiation poisoning. I am insatiable. I know no flag, no God, no mall. I stand alone. You voted to protect me. You voted for federal laws to protect me. I am the only business in America immunized from liability when crimes are committed using my weapons. My weapons are your national security. My weapons are your wealth to the moon and Mars. My weapons make jobs for the hungry in America. My weapons make humanitarian aid. You protect me. You make me feel good about who I am. I am the source of our nuclear agony. I throw down the gauntlet. My portals are open. I welcome you. Step inside. Track me down. See me face to face. Talk to me. Break the source if you dare. Repeal the laws you created to protect me. Repeal the laws, the federal laws you created to protect me. Repeal them. The choice is yours, if you dare. You know my rightful name. I'm Raytheon. I'm Boeing. I'm Lockheed Martin. I am the source of our nuclear agony.
You brought this with
Oh,
you?
yeah. This was a banner that was made for me by a woman in Hiroshima when I was making a film about Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution. You may know that Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution has said since 1946. Oh, what's upside down? Oh no, that's right. Okay. Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution declared from 1946 that Japan would never again make war. And Japan has not made war since 1945. This is, and I made a film about Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution. In any case, this is a banner that a woman made for me, handmade, and she mailed it to me. I never met her. I have her name at home, but I never met her. And I was just so grateful that anyone would do something like this. And anyway, here it is that I can share with you, happy to share it with you. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Hortense Gerardo, and I want to thank the Actors Refuge Theater for allowing me to share this work, this creative nonfiction work called Luminescence of Science and Art, Lessons from the Life of Dr. Osamu Shimomura. Part 1, Science. Dr. Osamu Shimomura was an organic chemist who identified, purified, crystallized, and finally explained the mechanism of action of green fluorescent protein, or GFP. GFP enabled the study on a molecular level of processes occurring in vivo, which means in the living. In this sense, Dr. Shimomura, his life can be seen as a lifelong quest to solve the mysteries of bioluminescence, sparked by a singular earth-shattering moment of utter darkness. On August 9, 1945, the 16-year-old Shimomura had been assigned to work at a military plane factory in Isahara, 10 miles away from Nagasaki, to aid in the war effort. Dr. Shimomura described the moments before the bomb was dropped. Shortly before 11 a.m., a siren sounded at the Isahara factory, notifying us of an air raid. As usual, rather than going into a bunker, I went to the top of a nearby hill with a couple of friends and looked at the sky. We saw a single B-29 coming from north to south towards Nagasaki, about 15 kilometers away. I thought its course was unusual. The B-29 dropped 2 or 3 parachutes, and I heard sporadic gunshots. Watching carefully, I saw no people attached to the parachutes. Within a few minutes, another B-29 followed the first one, and a siren sounded the all-clear signal. We returned to our factory building. At the moment I sat down on my work stool, a powerful flash of light came through the small windows. We were blinded for about 30 seconds. Then, about 40 seconds after the flash, a loud sound and sudden change of air pressure followed. 11 years later, when he was 27 years old, against all odds, Shimomura-san published his first scientific paper on the crystallization of luciferin, an organic compound that emits light in the sea firefly or cypridina. He was thrilled to solve in 10 months a problem that a group of Princeton had pursued unsuccessfully for 20 years. In his words, "When I finally succeeded, I was so happy I couldn't sleep for 3 days. Since the end of the war, my life had been dark, but this gave me hope for my future. Probably the greatest reward I gained was self-confidence. I learned that any difficult problem can be solved by great effort." The jellyfish Aquaphora victoria is the source of the luminescent protein that emits blue light in the presence of calcium. Dr. Shimomura named this bioprotein aquarin, which means of the sea. It is also the source of the green fluorescent protein, or GFP, which won him the Nobel Prize in 2008, along with Martin Chalvey and Roger White Chen. I was a young research scientist at the Marine Biological Laboratory in the late 80s, where I would often run into Dr. Shimomura at various locations around the Lilly building. At the autoclave, taking out my glassware as he was waiting he was bringing up a crate of his own equipment for sterilization, for example, or at the lab equipment supply store in the basement, where he would silently nod his head by way of greeting while we waited for his own supplies to be delivered. At the time, I was unaware of the significance of his findings. The gene for GFP and its applications for studying biological processes in cells had yet to be identified. But I was keenly aware of being in the presence of science, where the usual courtesies of small talk were mercifully waived to make room for the mental calisthenics required of problem solving. The key to unlocking the mechanism of how GFP works came to him as an insight as he sat in a rowboat one day. Departing from the expected mechanism of action relying on an enzyme, he realized bioluminescence probably involves a protein, which might be inhibited at a certain pH, or in more poetic terms, the light was to be found from within. An echo of the feelings he described as a young man with his early experiments on luciferin. In 2013, Dr. Shimomura gave a talk at Los Alamos, and, as was his way, decided to focus on the science. However, he finally had the opportunity to inquire about the 3 parachutes dropped that fateful day by a B-29 bomber. He was able to see models of the original payloads dropped by the parachutes, which carried instruments for data transmission and measurements. After the war ended, a poignant note was found posted on the door of the University of Tokyo Marine Biological Station, located at Midget Submarine Base, Moroisiko, Japan, on September 2nd, 1945, by units of the U.S. Marine Squadron 20. It reads, "This is a marine biological station with her history of over 60 years. If you are from the East Coast, some of you might know Woods Hole, or Mount Desert, or Tortugas. If you are from the West Coast, you may know Pacific Grove, or Puget Sound Biological Station. This place is a place like one of those. Take care of this place and protect the possibility for the continuation of our peaceful research. You can destroy the weapons and the war instruments, but save the civil equipment for the Japanese students. When you are through with your job here, notify to the university and let us come back home to our scientific home. Signed, the last one to go." The sign hangs now on the 2nd floor of the Lilly Building at the MBL. We know now that the person who wrote this was Katsuma Dan, a former scientist at the Marine Biological Laboratory in Woods Hole, a predecessor to Dr. Osamu Shimomura. The art of science and redemption are the foundations of peace. Thank you very much.
Oh, that is great. My message is very simple. My name is Eileen Kurkowski. I'm part of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. Last year, we were given many thousands of little origami peace cranes from Japan to pass on for events like this. I attach them to a little message so that you can wear this pin that we made into pins and open up a conversation with somebody else, hopefully someone younger. And let them know what we were hearing today so beautifully, eloquently, touchingly for me. I would very much appreciate it if you wore it during this time and also in January, when the first full year after the ratification of the treaty to ban nuclear weapons went into force. Do it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And to counter Raytheon, Lockheed, a lot of those, signed a petition. The Japanese country, through the Hibakusha and relatives, collected, I think it's 8 million. And we and Will have collected over 10,000. We keep on adding. I'd like to pass this around, get your signatures. If you feel uncomfortable, that's fine. Just put a name, you don't have to put the address. I also want to leave you with hope because I have it. I really do, to see you here and to know that the people who work so hard in ICANN, the international campaign to ban nukes that got the Nobel Prize, the average age was under 35. That's hope for the future, to keep fighting and change the laws and cut their money stream. It's up to us to do a little bit, maybe 3 times this week, 3 times next week, and talking with people. And in January, and if you do it more, that's really cool. I'm an activist. I've got to do this.